This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Welcome to the Blood Red podcast. The Premier League have confirmed Liverpool remain on course to win their first league title in 30 years, but the action won't be returning in early May. I'm Guy Clarke, and welcome along as we get set to dive into the latest from the Premier League. We'll also be talking about what a champion both on and off the pitch Reds captain Jordan Henderson is. And once the more important and serious stuff is dealt with, we're going to be delving back through the archives as today marks 24 years since Collymore was closing in as Liverpool beat Newcastle 4-3 in perhaps the Premier League's greatest ever night. Well, certainly from a red persuasion, that is. Joining me to go through all of that is our chief LFC writer, Ian Doyle. Doyle, how are you?
I'm okay, yourself?
Yeah, not bad, thanks. Dan Kay, how are you, mate?
I'm all right, thanks, Guy. Glad it's Friday, even if obviously weekends have a slightly different feel to them at the moment. But yeah, looking forward to getting into some red-hot soccer chat, as David Mel used to say about our wonderful team.
Brilliant stuff, and the sun is certainly shining. What a start that is from Dan Kay, and also Matt Addison with us. Matt, how are you?
Yeah, as good as I can be, considering the circumstances. Being cooped up in the flat isn't the ideal scenario, but yeah, I'm doing okay, thank you.
And it's certainly, whilst the sun's shining and you want to get outside, it's felt like a long day all round, but the Premier League have been having their meeting today, Doyle, and certainly a lot of it coming out from them, primarily that football isn't going to be coming back from the 1st of May because the initial suspension was still the 30th of April. We seem now to be in an indefinite suspension.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the many things, as you say, that came out of this meeting. I think everybody knew that football wasn't going to be coming back at the start of May. You know, anybody who's followed the situation that's been going on around the country would know that, and obviously around Europe and the world as well. So no surprise there. What was interesting is that for all the talk we've had of, people some clubs want to avoid the season, it seems though there is a collective will between all the clubs to conclude the season, but as they say, only when it is safe to do so, and also only with, government approval and the approval of the services, the medical services, the police, and whatnot. So it won't be happening anytime soon. But it's good for Liverpool in the sense that at least there's a bit of clarity now, and that that going forward, everybody seems to be on the same page. They all want to conclude the season. I think the statement said for maintain the integrity of the competitions, which is fair enough. I mean, we've seen people, we've spoken about it already, Harry Kane saying, earlier this week, that he wouldn't mind if it's not all done by the end of June or July. He said that we should just scrap it and start again. But, we've all spoken about this, myriad of other issues that could take place. It could get locked. We could get locked down again, further down the line. So I think it's the sensible thing to do. It's also sensible not to put any deadline on it, because then there's no pressure, is it, for anybody to stick to something. But I mean, they'll all be making plans. They'll be, going through various situations for if and when it comes back. Even if they get the green light, it'll be a few weeks after that, because we've mentioned before that they'll have to have some kind of mini, pre-season to get the players all fit again, because they won't have, while they're doing their own training programs, they won't have trained properly, certainly not as a team for a number of months. And I'm sure you'll touch on it in a bit, but there are one or two other issues that came out of it. I mean, the Premier League are going to donate £20 million immediately to the NHS. They're also going to give £125 million to the EFL clubs and National League clubs, particularly those who are struggling, because, some are going to be struggling a bit more than others. We've seen that already with some clubs, some of the tough decisions they've had to make in those lower leagues. And there's also going to be a meeting tomorrow where they're going to discuss with the PFA that players could take up to 30% wage cut. Whether that's a wage cut for now or a deferral, I don't know. I mean, that's something they'll thrash out. But, given the fact it was, 48 hours when the government was having a bit of a sly dig at Premier League footballers, it seems they've issued a bit more of a more cohesive, considered and, definitive response than some other people are doing at the moment.
Yeah, no, certainly. Really sort of going through just how much it obviously means, Dan, but I think one of the key things I certainly took from reading the statement was the fact that these games are now going to obviously be played to the conclusion for the integrity of the competition. And it seemed to hint to me, I know it was one of the big talking points we had on Monday's episode, but for that integrity, and once it's all safe to do so, that could involve obviously playing it out full with the fans returning.
Well, as someone who's a journalist but also a football fan, I think I've said a few times that for me, if it's in any way possible for supporters to be there, then I think it very much should do, because I think it ties into the integrity of the competition when we've had 3/4 of the matches played in front of crowds. So you could argue that the results of those, if games were played without crowds, it's a different variable. But also in a wider societal sense, I also think it's very important for all football fans, whether they actually attend matches or not, because it's worth pointing out that, if these games were played behind closed doors, all right, only a fraction of the football watching public actually goes into the stadiums, but an awful lot of people like to go out and go to the pub or go to the mates and watch it. And obviously, if the games was played in the current lockdown conditions, then everybody would still be completely isolated as it is. So I agree with what Doyle said. I think for me, one of the most important aspects of it was that they haven't made themselves hostage to fortune by putting a date on it. I think I'm right in saying, was the first date that they came up with after the initial suspension in early March today, or
tomorrow? Tomorrow,
yeah,
tomorrow. I think, yeah.
That's right, because the first game back would have been City Liverpool, which obviously should have been tomorrow. Then obviously there was this second extension to the 30th of April, and I think it very much seems like a common sense move now that they haven't put a date or a number on it, but at the same time they've reasserted quite categorically that the desire, seemingly from the majority of clubs. I think we've all heard whispers here and there and probably have our own views on that. There will be some clubs that would quite happily have the whole season expunged from the records because it would suit them and would kind of like really let them off the hook for having a pretty bad year. But the consensus seems to be that people want to see it to a conclusion, and I think that's the way it has to be. However long it takes, because as Doyle pointed out, we don't know if we could be in lockdown again at some point further down the line. I noticed, Kevin de Bruyne has jumped on the Harry Kane bandwagon, didn't he, in the last 24 hours and said, well, if it's not done by a certain date and it problems this season, then it's just got to be done. Well, why is next season more important than this season? It's cross one bridge at a time. Let's get this season sorted. Obviously, there's going to be disruption because none of us have lived through anything like this. These are unprecedented circumstances.
Well, Doyle may have.
Hey.
That was the Boer War, wasn't it? So no, I feel kind of quite encouraged by what we've heard this afternoon in terms of Liverpool's title hopes. But chatting to a friend the other day who's a Tottenham fan, who was saying we must be on pins about this league, and I was saying, well, to be honest, not really, because in my mind we've morally won it. To me, no matter what happens now this season, we'll all have a bit of a shadow over it because of coronavirus. And in many ways, it might even serve a purpose long term for Liverpool, in that, if there was a slight sense of having scaled Everest by winning this league, the fact that this championship, whenever it's completed, will have a slight different aspect to it, means that hopefully there'll be that desire to go on and win it properly again when next season gets going, whenever that may be.
I mean, I would like to point out that I think the UEFA meeting the other day has had a bit of a bearing on it, because they kind of made out that, we want all of the leagues to be played to a conclusion. And it was never said, but it was implied, wasn't it? Certainly some of the pieces that I read, that if you don't complete your season properly, we won't let you go into the Champions League and the Europa League next season. I know that Belgium stopped their league early this week, but they played 20 out of 30 games, and they have some kind of strange playoff system at the end. So they just did away with the playoffs thing and just counted everybody's positions as they were. And, they were able to say, I think it was Bruges, was it, that won the league? I think
that's right, Mignolet's side, yeah.
They're in the Champions League. I think Genk or Gent's one of those. They're in the Europa League or whatever it is, basically. So they were a special, circumstance for everybody else. The likes of Italy, France, Spain, Germany, England. I think UEFA want them to conclude their leagues, and it looks as though with the Premier League setting this precedent, I think the others will do the same thing as well now.
Matt Addison sat patiently waiting to have your contribution. was gonna go in on the UEFA thing, and obviously Kevin de Bruyne saying, along with Harry Kane, the league should be scrapped. Simon Mignolet's going to be getting his hands on a league title in his first year, obviously back in his homeland. And I suppose it is just brilliant from a Liverpool fan perspective, as much as anything, that we are going to see this season played up to a conclusion. Another affirmation from the Premier League, really, to nail down that this league is going to get done.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the only sensible solution, and I think actually the Premier League come out of this with today's statement really looking quite good, actually. I think they've addressed so many different parts of it, that the NHS and that sort of thing, as well as the footballing integrity. And I think actually an authority's perspective, I think they will look back and go, actually, that was quite good PR, if nothing else, of the way they've gone about it and the way that they've come to that conclusion. It would have been easy to get muddled up with all the different interests of very different clubs, and as Doyle points out, the UEFA meeting kind of gave them a little bit of clarity and a little bit of a direction of the best way to go from there. But there was no there's no precedent for this. There was no reason for them to get it quite as clear as what they have done first time round. So okay, we've criticised them in the past for coming up with maybe premature dates or premature targets for getting this league back on again. But I think they have come to a sensible conclusion. The statement from what I've read has been really clear and really positive, and that's not just looking at it from a Liverpool perspective. I think most Premier League clubs will completely agree that was the only option really going forward. And once the league does get back, as Dan said before, it would make no sense to move on to a new season when this season is 75% of the way through. I mean, this one has to take precedence. That's something we've said from the start, and this meeting just completely reaffirms that, as you say.
Another issue that's really come to the fore, Doyle, certainly over the last 24, 48 hours, is the amount of money that footballers get paid. You said, obviously, Matt Hancock, the health secretary, referred to it, was asked directly about it. In fact, in the press conference yesterday, the daily briefing the government are giving on the coronavirus situation, and the Premier League have said in that statement today that there is unanimously agreed that the Premier League clubs will consult their players regarding a combination of conditional reductions and deferrals amounting to 30% of total sort of annual remuneration. So a 30% pay cut perhaps on the cards for Premier League players. It's a weird situation we find ourselves in, obviously, with Premier League football, because we all talk about how much players earn all the time, that it is something that is kind of out there in the public. It seems a private matter that we shouldn't really, on podcasts like this, be talking about.
Well, then we shouldn't, then, should we? But don't forget they do pay a lot of tax. Well, so they're on it as well. So it's not as if it's all going into their pockets, and so they're funding quite a lot of some of the big earners. I mean, okay, I understand that he was asked the question, but the same could be said for an awful lot of people who work in certain industries where they get paid an awful lot. I wasn't going to name them, but you got bankers. There's one, and we can go through all of the names of the individual Philip Green people like that, who earn a lot. I'm just going for it. Who earn a lot of money, and let's just see, because give them the opportunity. Let's just see what they actually give back at times of crisis. Because the thing about footballers is that they're obviously, for whatever reason, right or wrong, they're seen as like moral arbiters, aren't they, of society in a way. When people talk about, for example, racism, people talk about racism in football, but it's racism in society. But because football is an area where it's quite obvious where it happens and that millions and millions of people see it, it's kind of held up. And though it won't say football is in some way having to lead the way. And I agree with what Matt said. The PR that'll come out, even though they weren't aiming for this, the PR that'll come out from that statement, it's kind of shut everybody up, all the critics, because then they can just turn around and say, we've done this and we've done it within weeks. What are you going to do? Everybody's having to play the part. They're playing it. So let's just see what the critics of the footballers, and there are other sports where people get paid a fair amount of money. It's sure that they probably are paying, they're doing donations to the local food banks, their local charities, their local community. They're helping out. It doesn't mean that they have to go around and tell everybody all the time. So let's just wait and see what happens with that.
No, and also away from Liverpool, but there's stories that come out a week that sort of completely show football in two different lights. The mainstream view that gets taken is Jack Grealish doing a video telling people not to go out, crashing his car, and then being called out about it and having to apologise. The other being Marcus Rashford, and albeit a Manchester United player, but doing an awful lot for local charities that Dan doesn't seem to get picked up and given as much credence.
No, it doesn't. And I think you get the impression that a lot of the people who involve themselves in good works in the community like that often actually insist on no publicity. We've had a story on the website earlier this afternoon about Jordan Henderson and how he's involved in trying to lead some kind of coordinated response to support the NHS. And he the headline on the story actually says he doesn't want credit for it. So it's, Matt makes a very good point about PR, and sometimes it's quite clear that when some things are done primarily for that basis. But bearing in mind how fragile a lot of people are feeling emotionally and mentally at the moment, I think it's very important that the right messages go out there. Obviously, we're all having to take the situation very, very seriously because it is an incredibly serious situation. But at the same time, I think it's important where possible to reassure people, kind of put people's minds at rest as much as possible. And footballers, as Doyle said, do play a significant role and probably do have perhaps at times more attention focused on them and their actions than maybe is fair, because at the end of the day, they're only parts of society like anybody else. You could argue that, well, the money they get, the fame they get, the adulation, the dream life that they've got that we would all love to do, maybe means that they have to take that on the chin. But at the end of the day, they're human beings like anybody else. And the Liverpool and Everton have both been very, very, very well known over the years for their excellent work in the community over decades, really, of bringing people together and supporting each other through hard times. And maybe at times it's been felt by some that it might be almost a little bit of a box ticking exercise. But I think what we're all living through at the minute, I think, really shows the worth of these kind of ventures. And I think it's very much hoped that once, please God, we all come through the other side of this, that people really understand and really get the benefit of these kind of games and give them the support both financially but also in terms of their time that they deserve.
Yeah, and within the Premier League statement, Matt, they mentioned how the Premier League clubs have already been supporting tens of thousands of people in their communities and talking about donations to food banks, phone calls to the elderly. That fans mentioning Everton, they've certainly obviously been doing that. But this £20 million that is also being donated to the NHS. Dan alluded to it before, Jordan Henderson. I suppose it just shows leadership doesn't just come on the field of play, but he's, as the leader of the Premier League leaders, is getting in touch with all of the clubs around the division to ensure that the clubs do sort of club together as they can for our National Health Service.
Yeah, exactly that. I think Liverpool fans will be reading that story and being really proud, actually, that it's Jordan Henderson who's the one who's taken the initiative and sort of led the way with that for the rest of the Premier League teams to follow suit. And, it just goes to show really what we all know of Jordan Henderson. He's that sort of character. He's shown himself to be that sort of leadership, as you say, in a footballing sense, but it's that human sense as well, which, it's all too easy to go on the negative side with football stories, as you've both discussed already. And, something like this, I think, as much as he's not doing it for the reason of look at me, look at the big contribution that I'm making, I think it is massively important that we do highlight it and do sort of cancel out, if you like, the negativity that does go towards footballers at times, just because, Jordan Henderson has done something that he didn't have to do. He didn't have to go out of his way to make that contribution, but the kind of person that he is and the kind of captain that he is for Liverpool Football Club, that's what he deemed to be the right thing. And I think, I'm not the only one who can look at that and smile and go, yeah, that's exactly what we want Liverpool Football Club to be about.
And Doyle, Matt says there that Liverpool fans reading that story, seeing that story, will be proud. Another thing is they probably won't be surprised, will they?
No chance. Everybody knows what, we've seen what's happened over the last couple of weeks with certain players, putting donations through to food banks and whatnot. I mean, Andy Robertson's one who's for a long time has been key to that. So, it's not just those two. It's, all the players probably, they do their bit in their own separate little way. You look at Alisson Becker, he's a World Health Organization ambassador, so he was doing this even before, for about a year or so. So, I think there was a story we ran the other day about, he was speaking with was it Manuel Neuer? No, Ter Stegen at Barcelona, and he was teaching him how to wash his hands properly. So he said, of all the things he could tell me, it was just something like that. And then he said, Ter Stegen then said, the importance of that is that, as footballers, we've got millions of followers on social media. So if we put a video out or a message out saying this is how you're supposed to wash your hands, then loads of people see it, then more people see it on that. So they're using their fame for good. As I said, it's not just footballers. There will be other, celebrities or other sportsmen or people like that. Everybody, as Dan said, everybody's doing the bit because, it doesn't discriminate, this virus, does it? Everybody can get it. So it doesn't matter how much money you've got in the world or how little money you've got. You're you've got as much chance if somebody's walking next to you. You know, is anybody getting it? So it is one where the footballers have to be, I wouldn't say they have to be seen to do their bit, but they've taken it on themselves to do what is right. And there are not enough people in this world who are in a position that could do that, who are doing so.
No, definitely. And well put. Well, here on the Blood Red podcast, whilst we do have a break in football, as you may realise over the last episodes, we're talking about the current situation and then moving into a bit of nostalgia and talking about things that have gone on through the years. We've spoken about Torres, we've spoken about Coutinho, and today on the podcast, we're going to talk about a game 24 years ago, Collymore closing in, Liverpool beating Newcastle United 4-3 at Anfield. They repeated the trick the following year, actually, in March 97 as well. But as well as that game, we'll talk about greatest games at Anfield, just in the Premier League. We talk a lot about European nights at Anfield, but in the Premier League. And firstly, I'll come back to you, Doyle. In terms of this game, I mean, it took some beating, some time for any game in the Premier League year to come close to it, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Dan will say the same thing. I was there, so it was. I'm pretty sure it was a Wednesday, wasn't it? It was a Wednesday night. Yeah, I'm sure it was a Wednesday night. Wednesday night. It was a little bit chilly. What I can tell you about that is one of only 2 times ever, certainly the only time as a fan, where I've left my seat during the game because I was absolutely desperate for the toilet. Right. And it's when Newcastle made it 1-1, and I went, I can't wait any longer. So I went off. And
10 minutes in, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I just couldn't wait. So I thought, I can't get to half time here. So they make it 1-1. I've got to go. So I went off, and as I'm in there, I just hear this kind of, slight roar. I'm thinking, what's happened there? Came out, and of course, there's no scoreboard or anything. So I'm walking all the way back to my seat, sit down, and then my brother says to me, "Yeah, it's 2-1 to them." So I managed to miss one of the goals in that game, but yeah, it was one of those ones where, I think Liverpool scored early, didn't they? Robbie Fowler, the
3
header.
minutes, yeah,
and even then you could tell. You can always tell, I know Jurgen Klopp's spoken about it now where he says there's always something in the air at European nights, but that felt like because it was the game, it was under the floodlights. It's a big game between two teams who at the time were renowned just for basically going for it, partly because neither of them could defend, to be honest. So, and you had obviously the story of Keegan coming back, and the added intrigue was that Liverpool was still in the title race at that point. I'm pretty sure I'm saying that they then lost 1-0 to Coventry the following, about 4 days later, which kind of ended it for them. But it was exciting times, and with the players on show, you had Russian. I think Russian Barnes came on as subs, didn't they?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so you've got those players coming on.
Barnes started the game, yeah. Rush came on.
Oh, did he? Rush came on, yeah. So you've got those players playing. They're coming towards the tail end of their careers, and then you've got the likes of, I think, fair to say, Rob Jones was playing left wing back, because McAtee was right wing back. Yeah. So he was kind of at his peak before the injuries totally took hold. McAtee was enjoying it. Then you got Fowler, Pomp, McManaman. Collymore, when he was very good in his first season, then you got all the Newcastle players. So looking back, it was a recipe for it to be a great game, and then just the way that the game went as well, wasn't it? 1-0, then 2-1, then 3-2. Then it was, it seemed as though even at 3-3, there was a sense that this one hasn't finished yet. And of course, when then Collymore does score, you've seen the images of Kevin Keegan on the sidelines, And in some ways, I know people talk about, Alex Ferguson's mind games at the time, and that I'd love it if we beat them. That's when Newcastle lost that league. That goal, that basically was it. I know it must have been about 6 weeks before. That kind of put the seed of doubt into the minds that they were just thinking, oh no, because they'd had a very big lead. I think it had been cut back by that point, but they were still very much in it. And then, we saw what happened.
Yeah, we certainly did. You mentioned you missed Newcastle's second goal, scored by David Ginola. Well, you'll get a chance to watch it this evening. Sky Sports putting a repeat of the full game on, so you get a chance
I've seen it since, by the way. Yeah.
If you were in any doubt, you would get a chance to see it tonight. But Dan, I know we've spoken in the office actually about this season, and that Liverpool really were sort of in touching, just certainly going into the latter stages of the season, trying to win that game. And it is one of the things actually that's often forgotten. Liverpool winning that game, how important that was for Liverpool, as much as Doyle said, it was really the night that Newcastle's grip on the title perhaps began to lose.
Well, absolutely. But also as well, it's worth pointing out that the Sunday before this match, Liverpool had beaten Aston Villa in the FA Cup semi-final. So everybody was up for it. You know, Liverpool was final for 4 years, but it felt an even bigger game because there was this jubilant feel about the city because we got through to Wembley. We knew we were going to play Manchester United in the final, where obviously United were, absolutely in pomp under Ferguson. So it was so beautifully. I should point out at this point, I unfortunately was not at the match. It was my first year. No, it was my first year. It was my first year as a season ticket holder. I had a lovely little season paddock halfway between the halfway line and the Kop end, just towards the back. But unfortunately, I had a family event that I, by hook or by crook, could not get out of. So, and because basically everyone else I knew was going, my lovely paddock seat stayed empty. So I did manage to avoid the score, likey lad style, for, over the course of the evening. I managed to get home and watch it. I think there was a match of the day. Like we didn't have Sky then, but we watched match of the day.
I was going to say, you video you tape recorded it
on the old VHS, not quite Betamax, but it was VHS. And as jubilant as I was, there was also this kind of like aching feeling in my stomach that I've probably missed maybe the greatest match I'll ever go to now. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have been to Istanbul and Barcelona and had some epic memories since then. But as Doyle pointed out, as the dust settled from the game, it all of a sudden became clear that for 3 days, really, Liverpool were in with a tilt at double. And unfortunately, as was sadly endemic or symptomatic of that side under Roy Evans, they just had this brittle side of them. The pressure was really on, and we saw it particularly the following season when they ended up finishing fourth in the 2-horse race. They played some of the best football I've seen in 35 years plus of watching the Reds, but they didn't have that mental application to get themselves over the line. It should be pointed out as well, United were a good side, and we had this incredible mentality instilled into them by their manager. But it'll always go down as one of the. I did go to the 4-3 the following year, but it was very much a different feel that game, wasn't it? Because for 70 minutes, Liverpool were phenomenal, 3-0 up, and playing like champions. And then, unfortunately, the last 20 minutes they were horrific and conceded 3 goals. And even though Fowler scored that one, really magnificent header at the Kop end, really attacked across from sticking to Bjornery. I remember walking out the ground I think it was a Monday night game, walking out the ground thinking, as exhilarating though that is, you can't win a championship defending like that. And unfortunately, that proves to be the case.
I have a confession to make about that game because I was at that one and I agree with them. It was 3-0 after 70 minutes. Liverpool put them off the park. Then he went to 3-all. I think David James was at fault with one of them.
James was all three.
Yeah, he was all over the place. Anyway, when he went to 3-all, me and my mates just went, we'd had enough. And where we sat was on that way line, right? And we got up, walked out, mouthed something towards the dugout, walked out. And as we just got outside the ground, we had this huge roam. We just looked at each other and went, oh. So
you missed it. Wow.
Wow.
Confession to being
yeah.
And I think there's only to put this into perspective, I think there's only ever 2 games ever since before that when I was a lot younger and we used to have to sometimes leave a bit early where I've missed goals right at the end. So since then, the only 2 games that I've made goal were those 2 Newcastle 4-3s.
Wow, yeah. So of the 14 goals, Ian Doyle's in 12 of them. But Matt, it'd be unfair to say to yourself, mate, what are your memories of the game? Because I'm not sure if you were on the planet yet. But I mean, you must be looking forward to perhaps watching it back tonight. But thankfully for the Reds, there haven't been a shortage of great Premier League nights and days at Anfield ever since.
No, I mean, it's one of those games that it was actually about 18 months or so before I was born, so I wasn't there, and I don't remember it.
That's so impressive.
Yeah, it's one of those games that, you see it talked about, and I've heard that commentary line. I think it was Martin Tyler, actually, wasn't it? Which is interesting, given the kind of relationship that he has with some Liverpool fans at the moment, if you like. And it's one of those iconic Premier League moments, and it's interesting that we always talk about Champions League moments and we never really look back at Premier League games, and whether that's because Liverpool up to now haven't won the Premier League or whether it's the night thing that, most of the Champions League games, of course, under the lights, and most Premier League games aren't. I'm not too sure, but yeah, there's been plenty of very, very good Premier League games over the past however many years it's been, and that was certainly one of them. But yeah, plenty more as well, which I'm sure we're going to delve into in just a second.
Yeah, we best get into them. Just before we do, I just want to ask Doyle and Dan just quickly on, obviously, Collymore and Fowler both grabbing a brace on that night. We don't really talk now so much about strike partnerships, but we had an interview on the Blood Red channel earlier today that for the first I got to listen to it, getting the audio ready for it. And Stan Collymore talking about that partnership with Robbie Fowler. Just wondered your guys' thoughts on actually how strong and how formidable a partnership that was, because at the time, Collymore was obviously a British transfer record.
I mean, Collymore was a player who he could have been whatever he wanted to be. He had absolutely everything. He could shoot from distance. He knew where the goal was. He could just run past players. He could dribble past them. He was powerful. He just knocked them over. He could score headers. He could do more or less everything. But, it's like so many other players that, for whatever reason, it just didn't work, whether he had the mental strength. I know he's had problems with that since. Whether that had anything to do with it, I don't know for sure. But for that 12 months when he first signed for Liverpool, I think 95 he signed, so that 95-96 was the first season. And with him and Fowler, they were almost unplayable at times. And that game was a prime example of it. I mean, the thing is that the following season, it didn't quite, for whatever reason, I can't quite remember why things started to go a little bit wrong. And then Michael Owen came on the scene, and that was kind of it, basically. So, but for Collymore, he could have been, he's almost like one of the great lost talents at Liverpool, even though when you look at his numbers, he did really well.
Absolutely. I would only concur with what Ian said. I think it was quite well documented, even from the first couple of weeks. They didn't get on particularly well off the field. And I think within the first 6 weeks, 2 months or so, Ian, I remember Collymore doing an interview in 442 or something like that, saying what industry would spend this amount of money on a player and not know how to use him. And after a good start to the season, they had a pretty dodgy November, lost 3 or 4 games. But things kind of really picked up again around about Christmas time or just before Christmas. One game that sticks out to me particularly was Nottingham Forest on New Year's Day, particularly because I'd gone to a big party or something in London, stayed up all night, got the train back in the morning, and with Liverpool 2-0 down after about 15 minutes, I was thinking, why did I bother? But the two of them combined, Collymore and Fowler, I think they got 2 each. Liverpool were level by half-time and won 4-2. The atmosphere was always the kind of thing. Anfield's at its loudest sometimes when Liverpool are behind but coming back. And I've seen highlights of that game before. And those two, obviously, Collymore was particularly fired up because it was this game back against his old club. And the two of them, I think they got 55 goals between them that season in the league, or maybe all told. Fowler 36 and Collymore 19, which are really good numbers. And I think one incident from this game, it sums up the kind of almost not quite telepathic on a Keegan Toshak type scale, but the way they were on the same wavelength. The opening goal in the first couple of minutes, where the move broke down the Liverpool left, and Collymore, on what supposedly was his weaker left foot, just swung this magnificent first time cross from the byline right onto Robbie Fowler's head, who bulleted it past, I think, the late Turnishek in the Newcastle goal. And they were a fantastic partnership. And as Doyle said, it's a real kind of feeling of what might have been with those two, really.
Yeah, certainly. Well, let's get into some other great Premier League occasions then at Anfield. Matt, I'll let you kick us off, mate, because we've heard, I'll say in the comparison terms, the old agers have their turn. So, Matt, you can kick us off on this one, mate.
Yeah, from a personal perspective, one of the games that I remember really well was the 3-2 win over Manchester City in 2014. It's one that gets picked out all of the time for a variety of reasons. Obviously, I think it was sort of the 34th game maybe of that season where it looked like Liverpool were end to that Premier League drought, and certainly I think it's easy to look back at that game now and think, oh, well, what happened after that means that it wasn't such a great occasion. But actually, on the day, being there, the atmosphere, the whole thing around it, the emotion as well. I think that, it would have been the 25th anniversary of Hillsborough was that weekend, and the sort of whole occasion, the way it was marked was unbelievable to be a part of that. And in terms of the game itself as well, the way that Liverpool won it, that Felipe Coutinho, his name popping up again on a Blood Red podcast. The late goal from him, the way that the game ebbed and flowed, and obviously we talked about the 4-3 Newcastle game before, and it wasn't quite that crazy, but it was two absolutely top class teams who went at and attacked, and even though it was such a huge game in the title race, it was, I'm sure from a neutral perspective as well, it was a fantastic game to watch, and so many brilliant performances from both teams. But James Milner, of course, playing, I think, came on at half time.
Yeah, he did.
Absolutely sensational, and plenty of other players as well. David Silva, I think, was remarkable on that day as well. But yeah, what a season that was for Liverpool, and that for me was the best game of that season, not least because I was there.
Yeah, and much like Dan, you saying, or Doyle, which one of you actually it was who said about that being the night that the 4-3 that Newcastle actually began to lose grip of the Premier League title. That was the day in 2014 that Liverpool were getting their hands, or getting one hand on the title. I don't know if you agree, Doyle.
Yeah, but I'd rather talk about a game that happened a few weeks before that against Arsenal.
How surprising.
Where it's funny, isn't it, that 5-1? There were 6 goals in that game. And the one thing everybody remembers is the goal that didn't go in, which was Suarez's shot against the post, which I have to say is in my top 3 Premier League moments of the last 15 years. The other 2 being David Silva's pass to Edin Dzeko for Man City's goal in the 6-1 at Old Trafford.
Yeah.
And the other one being, and it's a bit of a niche one, it's the last minute of every Arsenal in 2016 in December when Petr Cech went up front. And there's that famous picture of him I think it's Petr Cech, he's in the back of the goal. And Stekelenburg is like the Everton goalkeeper, and he stood in front of him. So it's like that, and so I think Arsenal are trying to I think he's trying to have a shot, and his own goalkeeper is behind the goalkeeper that he's trying to put the ball in the net. And Everton break down the other end and should score and miss an open net, and then Arsenal break down the other end and then nearly score, and the game ends. So that doesn't really answer your question, but I just wanted to get in there. But yeah, the Arsenal 5-1's one. There's another one which I think Dan will remember. In '99, Liverpool played Everton. And they hadn't beaten them in something like 5 years.
5 years.
On this
day, what April the 3rd?
On this day, yeah.
Yeah.
They won 3-2, but in the last minute, there was this young lad. He'd only made a few appearances. Whether he'd come on a sub or started, and he
came on as a sub, right back.
He backheeled a shot off the line, and his name was Steven Gerrard, and it was celebrated as though it was basically a goal. So it was. That's also the one where Robbie Fowler did some. Copied Rigobert songs, African celebration, was it? Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, that was it, Gerrard. Yeah.
No, Dan, I mean, in terms of games there, Doyley's basically gone through the whole back catalogue. But that Everton one, I suppose for you, probably just stand out as well, does it?
It very much. I was at the Priest Derby that Liverpool had won, which was the last one in front of a standing Kop in March 1994, when Fowler scored on his Derby debut, having come back from a broken leg. And I think I went to pretty much every derby in between that Liverpool didn't win. It was Joe Royal Dogs of War period. And even though I think in that period, 94 to 99, Everton had 2 last day escapes from relegation, Liverpool just couldn't beat them. So going into that match, I mean, Liverpool were having a lousy season. It started with the doomed joint manager situation between Houllier and Evans. It ended up with Man United winning the treble. And it was slim pickings, really, for Reds fans. So really, a win over the Blues was very much needed. The game got off to the worst possible start when Olivier Decour scored a deflected goal at the Kop end within 40 seconds. But Robbie Fowler scored 2 goals and celebrated them in his own inimitable style, should we say. And when Patrick Berger kind of volleyed from a corner like 10 minutes left, I remember great celebrations thinking, that's it, 3-1. It's a lovely sunny day and we can relax now and enjoy our weekend. But Everton... Francis Jeffers pulled one back straight away, and I remember thinking that'll be the first of many for him because he looked a great young prospect for the position. Obviously, didn't really happen for him. And then all of a sudden, we were under the caution. And I think, if I remember rightly, Doyle, I think Gerrard actually kicked the ball off the line twice, both times from Danny Cadamarteri. After both times, David J gone AWOL had a goal, which unfortunately
that's unlike him.
Yeah. Well, don't get me started on him. But when the whistle went, it was a great, it was a real significant memory for me, kind of like coming out of the difficult period of my life, and it was a game I always kind of treasure, really. And just a couple of other ones to mention, I'd absolutely agree with Matt. The City game in 2014 the whole experience, the emotional power of everything before the game. It was the anniversary. The inquest had only just started a couple of weeks before as well. And Steven Gerrard's thing after the match, when he gathered the players in the centre circle and gave them that rallying call, and he's often mocked for that, and I think that's very fair, because to me that was exactly what he should have been doing. That was real captaincy, which at times, and it's a different podcast maybe, I didn't always think Gerrard was the greatest captain in the world, but he did the right thing that day, and all right, the fates conspired. I mean, you couldn't make it up. He says this does not slip, and he slips. You couldn't write that, could you? But to the day I die, I will remember that day as a real treasured memory, and Gerrard's performance in it before, during, and after. I remember his interview, his Sky interview after the game, and you could feel the emotion. He looked and felt as emotionally drained, I think, as everybody else did. To make Doyle feel a little bit better about his Newcastle faux pas, that 5-1 it mentioned, that was, if ever was a day not to get in the ground 20 minutes late, it was that. Right here.
What's going on? 4-0.
I missed the first 4 goals. I'm not even joking. It's a longer story for a different podcast. One other Arsenal memory. Sorry, Guy, but if we're talking about great Premier League moments, this one has to be mentioned as well. August 1994, the very first game at Anfield after the Spine Cop had been demolished. And a young Robbie Fowler, in only his first full season really in the team, scored this incredible hat-trick and fought against the quintessential Arsenal defence. 4.5 minutes, and it was a record that stood for 20 plus years until it was broken by
Sadio Mane.
Sadio Mane, there you go.
Yeah, no, I was going to come back to you, Doyle, actually, and say August 94. You can have a free shot. Robbie Fowler getting a quick hat trick against Arsenal, because that was a record that did stand. Really looked as though, to be fair, it was probably going to stand the test of the time, given how it takes players to celebrate nowadays.
Yeah, it did. I mean, I can pick another Arsenal game for if you want. There was a crap one. There's so many of them. There was a 4-0 over a Christmas thing in 2001 or something like that. So
Fowler hat trick, December 95.
Yeah, there's so many wins over even the recent ones. Was it 4-0 and there was a 3-1, and I don't know. There's just just keep coming.
So, Matt,
basically, yeah.
No, but we can sort of go on from that. But actually, talking of even modern ones and even more recent ones that we might in time look back on even more fondly, Jose Mourinho's final game as Manchester United manager, Matt, 3-1, Jordan Shaqiri getting a couple. That seemed to be a massive moment.
Yeah, I think obviously any win over Manchester United is a big moment, and that was certainly an enjoyable occasion. But it's not right up there with the absolute great Anfield days for Premier League wins, just because of where Manchester United were as a club at the time. And obviously you say it was Jose Mourinho's last game as manager, that kind of sums up the position that they found themselves in. So as much as obviously any win over a Manchester United, Everton, or a team like that is going to be important, is going to be enjoyed. It's not anywhere close to those other moments that we've discussed already.
I would suggest, actually, sorry to jump in, that this season's game over United was possibly more significant. If you remember when Mo Salah went through and scored the clinch, we were hanging on a little bit 1-0, and got that clinching goal in the final minutes of the second half. It was the first time really all season that the ground sung, "We're going to win the league," and that to me felt like quite a kind of symbolic moment. So I'd say in terms of that and the City game, the 3-1 in November, I'd say possibly with the 2 league matches that possibly stand out from this year's campaign.
Of course, possibly the most famous Premier League game at Anfield was one where Liverpool won, but nobody cared about it. The Blackburn game, the last game of the season, 95, which was a very odd atmosphere for everybody who was there. I know there was a lot of talk before the game of some Liverpool fans were saying, we got to support Blackburn. But the minute the game started, everyone was like, hang on, no, I didn't pay all this money to support Blackburn. And it was like, when Liverpool scored the goals, everybody was cheering. So it was a bit of an odd day. And of course, if you're from a Liverpool persuasion, it all ended particularly well. Liverpool won and United still didn't win the league. So good.
Kenny Dalglish, obviously the man to stop United from doing it. But that about wraps it up. Nice to actually not do something where we're having to rank aside what are the greatest moments. Nice to have a bit of a chuckle and laugh along the way as well. Guys, thanks a lot for your time.
No problem.
Cheers, Guy.
Cheers, Guy. Thank you very much.
Well, that wraps us up for this edition of the Blood Red podcast. Of course, we'll be back on Monday. Hope you can join us then. Until next time, bye for now.